Make You Feel My Love on BBC Radio London. It is 5:15. Now, I wanted to give you some news that has actually been going viral today, and I wanted to delve further into it. The TikTok video app is hugely popular around the world, especially with young people. But for many years, the Chinese-owned company has faced questions over the security of users' data and its links to the government in Beijing. Well, US politicians are currently debating legislation that would force TikTok's parent company to sell the app. But former US President Donald Trump has criticised the bill despite previously supporting a ban. Well, joining me now is tech expert and CEO of the marketing firm Rocket, James Erskine. James, great to have you back on BBC Radio London. Thank you for making yourself available to talk about this, because it's an ongoing story. What exactly is going on then?
Well, Shay, they have voted in the House, and they voted quite decisively. A lopsided vote of 352 to 65, saying that they would look to ban TikTok in the United States, which is fascinating on a number of levels. There are the 170 million US users of TikTok. There's the geopolitical angle between China and USA. And there's the US national politics angle, because, as you've said quite rightly, Joe Biden, despite having his campaign on TikTok, has said that he would sign off this ban, whereas Donald Trump has come out eventually against banning TikTok. So there are a number of different points up for discussion here. It should be said that depending on who you talk to, it's either a ban or it's a divestment of interest. So Nancy Pelosi was actually in the House during the debate saying how she doesn't see this as a ban of TikTok. She sees this as making TikTok better. And what they're asking ByteDance, the Chinese owner of TikTok, to do over the next 5 months is divest their interests in TikTok. So effectively look to find an owner that is more palatable to the USA.
And when you're sharing this news, there might be some tuning into Radio London thinking, but why is that relevant to us here in the UK? Is it because we have such strong ties, and this as oftentimes is quoted as a special relationship with the US?
That's partly the reason why it's really interesting. The second reason why it's really interesting is to us here in the UK and indeed in London is because what could happen as a result. So there could be a route out of this ban. It's worth saying that it's still to go to the Senate and it's still to be signed off by the US president. But it could mean a different ownership structure for TikTok. So that could mean that TikTok is owned by a different business, and that could affect the way that TikTok operates. But it could be that ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, actually decide that it's not worthwhile having an app that talks to the entire West. This is kind of a Cold War in terms of technology between China and the USA, and we in the UK could get caught in the crossfire.
And it's quite something, isn't it? Because of course there'll be those tuned into Radio London who say, but I just like to watch the dance videos on TikTok. What's the big issue? What is all the concern about with TikTok?
The big concern is the fact that it's owned by a Chinese business, ByteDance, and ByteDance have taken the unusual move in the past few days to try and mobilize its 170 million US users by saying that a ban is not the right way to approach this. It's worth noting that there are a number of businesses that are reliant on TikTok for their business model. And it's a strange decision when you're thinking about free speech. The other thing today is that there's been a ruling that's about to be passed about foreign ownership of media organizations, with the Telegraph in the UK. And if you look at that with ByteDance owning TikTok based in China, and you look at that through the prism of what's happened with the Telegraph as well, it's a really interesting space in terms of free speech and foreign ownership of media properties. But you're right. TikTok for a long time has been a app where people go to be their silliest selves, whether that be dance videos but TikTok has become much broader than that. It's aged up. It has newsmakers and news organizations on TikTok. And in fact, Joe Biden's own political campaign is on TikTok. So it shows that it has a really interesting connection with its user base, and the hours on TikTok are growing.
It's interesting that, because of course even we here, BBC, is on TikTok, isn't it?
Yes.
But there's a lot to discuss in terms of Europe as a whole. The European Parliament, European Commission and European Council banned TikTok from staff phones last year, didn't they?
Yep.
And that has kind of had some kind of impact here, of course, in Britain, because Britain announced a TikTok ban on government ministers and civil servants' devices last year. And that was all around this idea, this conversation of the security of state information. But it does seem that there are some countries who've been fine with a ban. If you look at, for example, India, they banned TikTok in 2020 over security concerns, and it was made permanent in January 2021. And it does seem that, you know, as a country, they've been able to have other platforms that have been just as successful as TikTok.
Well, before the House vote earlier this afternoon, Beijing actually condemned the push by US lawmakers and rejected the notion that TikTok was a danger to the United States. At their daily press briefing, Wang Wenbin, spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, accused Washington of resorting to hegemonic moves when one could not succeed in fair competition. So it shows that the voices from China have said that this isn't a danger to any Western audiences or any worldwide audiences. Although it's also interesting that platforms like Facebook and YouTube are blocked in China. And Beijing said last year that it would oppose a sale of TikTok. So it's important to say that lots of people voting for the in quote marks ban in the American House have said that they're not voting for a ban, they're voting for TikTok to find new owners that are more palatable to the United States.
And with that in mind, I've got to bring it a little bit closer to London, of course, James. If you are a TikToker in London and, you know, predominantly either your life is on TikTok or, more importantly, it's your work, and it's very reliant upon you being on a social media app like TikTok, should you be concerned at this point or not?
I think it will change. It's an interesting stalemate. If you were asked me to make a prediction, I think there'll be a legal challenge to this. And I think there will be a way that TikTok can survive in some way, shape or form in the United States. But that isn't to rule out the fact that it is really concerning if you are wanting to reach US audiences. You should be thinking about other apps. You should be thinking about other ways to reach your audience, whether you're a business or an individual. And you should be thinking about the social media diet of Americans beyond TikTok. I definitely think that this is an interesting space and one that anybody that is reliant on TikTok should keep watching with interest.
James, it's always a pleasure having you on Radio London. You seem to break down this tech news just so simply that people can actually digest it. So thank you for joining me yet again on Radio London.
Don't be silly. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for joining me. Now, James Erskine is the CEO of award-winning youth marketing firm Rocket. You can get more details on wearerocket.co.uk. He's also a tech expert as well. You can find him, of course, on X, formerly known as Twitter, as James Erskine.